Welcome to the HFMA Talk podcast, the podcast for NHS finance. Today, we'll be bringing you an episode in our new mini-series exploring finance career stories. Throughout the series, we'll be chatting to finance colleagues from different roles and organisations across the country about their career journeys, the opportunities they've embraced, the challenges they've overcome, and the lessons they've learned along the way. In this episode, our host, Lisa Robertson, is joined by Madi Parmar and Amy Whitaker. We hope you enjoy this episode.
My name's Lisa Robertson. I'm a Senior Policy Manager here at the HFMA, and I am delighted to be joined by Amy Whitaker and Madi Parmar to share their NHS finance stories as part of this podcast series. The series reflects on what it's like to actually work in NHS finance, and I hope you find that helpful. So welcome, Amy. Welcome, Madi.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you, so that'd be great. So let's start with a brief introduction from each of you, I think. Madi, could you start us off by telling us a bit about yourself, your career to date, that kind of thing?
Okay. I'm currently the CFO at Sandwell and West Birmingham hospitals. I only started there in January. Prior to that, I was at Covent Warwick ICB, and prior to that, a long stint at University Hospitals in Birmingham. I will confess and say I never intended to have a finance career at all. I did a degree in psychology at university. I always thought I would go into a caring profession or a people profession at some point. I had a mum who was a secretary at Derby City Hospital growing up, and spent a lot of time in and around the hospital because my mum was great, very much part of the hospital, helped organise the panto and all sorts, as well as her job there. So I ended up doing student jobs in the hospital. I've been a hospital cleaner. I worked in creditors, paying pharmacy invoices one summer and everything like that. So after I graduated, I did naturally get an NHS gap job at North Derbyshire Health Authority. And there's a lady there called Marilyn Pendlebury, who was the CFO and then later the chief exec. She said, "Have you thought about the National Financial Management Training Scheme in the NHS?" And I said, I want to be an accountant. And she said, "Well, you've done a lot of maths in your psychology. You clearly have a passion for the NHS. Give it a go." So I gave it a go and was appointed for my NHS enthusiasm and passion by a man called David Beacon, who ran the scheme up in Northern and Yorkshire at the time, where I applied. And in a strange quirk of fate and everything coming full circle, his son, Richard Beacon, was previously the chief exec of Sandwell and West Birmingham, where I am now.
Full circle.
Yes, the current chief exec is Diane Wake, but he was previously the chief exec. So it does feel like a kind of full circle of career. So there we go.
Excellent. Lots to talk about there, I think, in a moment. But Amy, can I bring you in?
Tosh can, yes. So I actually also, similar to Maddie, never set out to work in finance full stop, actually, let alone NHS finance. So I left school after my A-levels and went and worked in a call centre doing car insurance, worked for customer services. Did that for a couple of years and realised that even though I really enjoyed it, there was a great social scene, I have to say, in that organisation. Actually, it wasn't going to fulfil me for the rest of my life. So I did decide at that stage to go to university, where I, at that point, was more driven by how much money I could maybe earn, and therefore which course should I pick that might help me earn the most money, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I actually did a degree in business and IT, with the aim of being an IT project manager. That was my ambition. I spent a year during my placement year at British Airways, working in Heathrow as an IT project support. So really enjoyed that. But after university, I wanted to stay up north, and wasn't prepared to move to London. I did enjoy the year I had there, but I've got horses, and it was really important for me to keep my horses and be able to afford to live, to be perfectly honest, because you can acquire quite a lot of debt spending a year living in London, as I learnt. So So I ended up applying for a lot of different graduate schemes, to be perfectly honest. I applied for both the NHS ones, so general management and financial management. There were only 2 in that time. I know there's a lot more now. And got on the finance one. And the rest is history, to be honest. And what I always say is it's clear they had a good assessment process, because it does feel like it's been the right job for me from day one. It feels like I've fit. So I always think the assessment process must have been very good. So I got that job in the Northwest. So I was on the Northwest graduate financial management scheme with Christie. So I started there in 2002, and I was a shared trainee with the University Hospitals of South Manchester. So that's Wythenshawe Hospital. So it doesn't exist as its own trust anymore, as it's now part of the Central Manchester Trust. So a lot of change since then, but I got a permanent job eventually at Wythenshawe Hospital, where I worked my way up. And by the time I got to assistant director of finance level, I thought I really need to broaden my horizons, see how other organisations work. Don't get me wrong, I've worked across a lot of different sectors as part of the training scheme, but I really felt like it was time to move on. And that's when I got a deputy role at Airedale, and ended up moving over into Yorkshire. And I've been in this region ever since. Was in Airedale for quite a while. I set up their subsidiary company alongside the director of estates and became the finance director of their subsidiary company, and then eventually became the finance director at Airedale just before COVID, and then moved to Mid Yorkshire as CFO just under 4 years ago. Now it'll be 4 years in September. Can't quite believe where that time's gone. So yeah, rest is history.
It does sound like both of you have had lots of kind of twists and turns and opportunities and experiences along the way with different organisations, different people. I guess, what were some of the key turning points in your career, or the most memorable ones? Amy, do you want to pick up on that first?
Most memorable. Oh God, there'll be absolutely loads of things. I suppose I'll think of it more from the types of things that make me really proud, I suppose, and the things that I really enjoy, rather than thinking about memorable, because I can't think, nothing's coming to mind at the moment. But I suppose for me, the things that I've felt have been real achievements have been more around my teams and the successes for them, to be perfectly honest. I know that can sound a bit contrived to a certain degree, but when I moved to Airedale, there was no accreditation in place at all, and we moved that organisation from that state to level 2. And I suppose I get the most pride setting the targets and the goals and the ambition, and then watching people thrive within that. And people joke with me. They always joke with me that at the time it can feel really hard, but when they've actually achieved, you can see what I was trying to achieve for them as well as the organisation. So I really like to set challenging, demanding goals and let people grow into those, I suppose. And then since moving to Mid Yorkshire just a couple of weeks ago, we got level 3 accreditation. So they were already at level 2 when I moved here, but we got level 3 a couple of weeks ago, and that just makes me really proud, because it's a team achievement. That's not my achievement by any means, is it? I've said I'd love us to achieve level 3. I want to give space and time for it. That's really important, and the team have gone and done it, and yeah, I suppose that's made me really proud.
Brilliant. I think that it's often surprising to some people that this role is a people role, probably more than necessarily a technical role, isn't it? That's what you hear along the way. I don't know, Maddie, whether that's something that kind of rings true with your memorable or moments or things that you're most proud of.
Absolutely. I was thinking about explaining the role of a CFO when I was talking to the board the other day, and you are a people role. You have to be a sort of jack of all trades, but you're really only as good as your team. So it is very much about developing that team and building those relationships. And people have to, they really have to want to come to work, don't they? And a colleague was telling me the other day, she's new in post, and she said, I just want to feel I'm providing value. That's what motivates people, isn't it? It's not just the pay packet. They want to feel that they're really giving a purpose and making a difference. The other part of the role is communication. I feel like so much of my role is comms, sort of boiling down the complex financial issues into something that people can grasp and feel, so that they understand risk and they understand the issue. And sometimes, even when you think you've given out the message, it hasn't always landed, and you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it in ever simpler terms. So yeah, very much a people role. In terms of, happy times, then looking back, it is those roles where I think I said I worked at UHB, and I was there 22 years, which is a long time in one organisation, but started basically in financial management, moved into contracting and income, and then had a sort of deputy CFO broader role before I left. But in that sort of middle section in contracting income, I was a really happy time for me. Built a really strong, high performing team. We had a lot of commercial income streams, a lot of good contracts, and when we made sure we were well reimbursed for what we did. And the hospital, for those that know it, is a huge provider of specialised services as well. So the real opportunity to be, really involved with the development of some really cutting edge, life-saving, exciting treatments, and working with some fabulous clinicians as well. So there was the dual part of having a work family, a team that felt really cohesive. I'm actually still in their staff lottery, and I've left, 4.5 years ago. And some friends for life. Really, when you work in an organisation like that, that it carries with you forever. And then that other side, working with really exciting clinical services that are really making a difference to patients. So they're sort of the two things that spark joy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is trying to articulate to people why the role really matters to us and how finance can actually support some of the patient care. It can be not what you expect when you start your career in NHS finance, or if you're trying to explain it to someone at a party like what you do, it doesn't always equate to that patient care. But that's so prominent, isn't it? I don't know if you've got any good examples of that.
No, it's absolutely it's the pivotal part of the role, isn't it? And actually, it's what draws you into NHS finance, I think, as opposed to being an accountant. So I couldn't see myself in a career where I was the back office accountant by any stretch of the imagination. That wouldn't suit me in the slightest. So being able to work along fabulous colleagues, working with consultants, nurses, porters, all sorts of different people, aren't you, day in, day out, as opposed to sitting behind the scenes, just knowing a number. You do feel like you really get to understand the services in a lot of detail, and there's a lot of services, and if you work in specialist trusts, as Maddie said, there's a lot of specialist services that can be really complex in terms of the level of care they provide to patients. So being able to experience that, understand the offer of the NHS, and then try and make it a sustainable proposition so you can continue to provide really high quality services within the financial envelopes we've got is what keeps me coming to work every day, to be perfectly honest. Knowing there's a patient at the end of the work I do is the thing that does make it all worthwhile, because sometimes it is exceptionally challenging at the moment, in particular working in NHS finance. And that is the thing that keeps you going, I think. If I felt like I wasn't doing it for such worth, I think I'd be less likely to want to be continuing the career at the moment, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is tough times now, isn't it? Everywhere in the public sector, actually. I've got friends and family that work in other sectors, and you hear similar stories, education, police, health. But yeah, that motivation, there was the developing specialist services that save lives in my previous role, and more recently, my motivation to go to Sandwell was in between the two, I moved to the ICB because I was really attracted by what ICBs were supposed to be doing in terms of population health and reducing health inequalities. Obviously, RCBs have gone through a lot of change in the last turbulent 12 months. So, maybe didn't sort of perhaps have the opportunity to, in the short time that they existed in their previous state, to deliver on all of that. But I was attracted to go to Sandwell because it is an integrated trust that provides acute care, community care, and indeed primary care for a really population that has significant levels of deprivation, a highly multicultural population. So when you talk about developing neighbourhood health, we have the opportunity to really anchor ourselves in our community and be a real community asset, and really try and improve outcomes and for our population and reduce inequalities. And I think that's now such a driver. So it's, as much as the developing the nice, high-end tertiary stuff was in my previous role, because it is, that's why we're here at the end of the day. I, just like you, Amy, I wouldn't want to be just in a manufacturing accountant, or looking at the profit margin. It is about what difference we're making at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I think you're both right. It really can feel quite difficult at the moment, and looking at the tasks that everyone's trying to deal with. And I guess over time, and how have you dealt with periods of uncertainty or pressure in the role? Because it can feel quite stressful. How do you see your role in helping improve the overall morale of the community?
Can I start with that one? I just a plug for the HFMA, obviously, because all of my colleagues throughout my career have told me how envious they are of the finance profession because of how well networked we are and what fabulous peer support we give to each other. And that was very much the case when I stepped out of my acute comfort zone to go to the ICB and thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but I had such a fabulous network of people that I could phone a friend when I needed to, who would share experience, share knowledge, and that happens on a peer-to-peer basis. And also, it's such a repository of information, training materials, shared knowledge for people in my own team and my own department, to sort of encourage everyone to be an HFMA member, because we have something as a profession, that network and support, that other professions simply don't have. A colleague asked me the other day, "Oh, do you know such and such, another finance director?" And I said, everyone in finance knows everybody else, because we are so well networked, and it's so supportive when times are hard.
Yeah, I'd probably echo that 100%, to be perfectly honest, yeah, again, there's people trying to copy what HFMA 1 and NHS Finance have done, aren't they, across other professions at the moment, to help with some of that networking. I think the other bit for me, that I've probably learnt better over the years is just making sure you've got the right work-life balance as well. So loads of good networking internally, and externally, obviously, through, when I say internally, I mean NHS Finance, as colleagues. But I think for me, making sure the work-life balance is really strong really helps really helps me to make sure that I can cope during the challenging times. So because I'm quite good, to be honest, at compartmentalising, once I leave work, for me, I don't talk about work. And actually, none of my friends outside of work, don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of friends inside NHS Finance that I spend time socialising with. But generally outside of work, I try and make sure I'm not focusing on work whatsoever, and I have that complete shutdown, and that helps me be able to reinvigorate and keep going, basically, when times are hard. But I also think, as Maddie said, the networks we get from NHS Finance, the friends you make, couldn't be more supportive. The number of WhatsApp groups I'm part of, where you test out, you're being told you're not doing something that another organisation is doing, for example, and you can check that out and check what you're missing, etc. So really, really good, honest networks. But also that coaching and mentoring, isn't there? And just making sure you get that really early in your career, because it's really important. And I think you asked Lisa about the communication part of that. And one thing I've been reflecting on from the communication I do out into the organisation, I do a monthly briefing on the finances to the rest of the organisation. And I sort of noticed recently, I spend a lot of time, I've sort of got into that mindset, I spend a lot of time focusing on what we're not delivering in terms of the variance. And actually, what you forget is how much we are delivering. So, I might have a £50 million efficiency target. I'm constantly saying to the organisation, we need to do more. We've got a 10 million gap. But what I'm trying to do a bit more of is we have delivered £40 million of efficiency, team. So we are doing really well here. It might not be quite enough, but I've just started to think about how I change the communication and that I give to the organisation so that it remains positive about what we are delivering. But secondly, for me, it keeps the organisation motivated because it is a trust that's been in deficit for a long, long period of time, and you want people to see that you are making your way out of that, no matter how slowly it might be happening. So, I think that's one thing I've done a lot of thinking about recently.
I think that's a brilliant reflection, Amy. And firstly, you can have another WhatsApp group because I'm going to message you after this one. And then secondly, that cheerleading role. I mean, finances are really tough where we are as well at the moment, and it plays out in the staff survey. Everyone feels a bit dispirited, don't they? And we have to do the cheerleading part, because it is a long haul to turn things around. So brilliant.
Yes. And I think, Amy, you mentioned, didn't you, that people should be reaching out early in their career to look at the support networks, the opportunities that are available to them. If you were able to give advice to people earlier in their career, what kind of skills or experiences do you think that they should be really focusing on?
Yeah. Um, the- I was thinking about this the other week actually, as I was talking to another colleague that I'm doing some sponsorship for. I think from my perspective, it's really important to get yourself involved in a project that's outside of your organisation. So thinking particularly of neighbourhood health, as Maddie's just talked about, but even wider than that, anything you can do that is beyond your organisation's four walls. I think that is a really helpful start point. And I think I was thinking back to my career around how I've built up my networks actually, because their question to me was, how have you managed to build up your networks? And actually some of that was one through taking some leadership in future focused finance, as it was called in those days. But taking some leadership in that for my organisation, which meant I met with other future focused finance leads from across other organisations, but I also led on a project across Manchester from a finance point of view called Making It Better, which was about bringing maternity services into less sites, basically, to ensure they were safer. So being part of that meant I not only networked with finance colleagues from outside my organisation, but ops colleagues, clinical colleagues, and I think that just gives you the experience of how to build a network, how to quickly forge relationships with people that aren't in your normal space all of the time. And I think they're really important because every connection you make, it always surprises me still. I make new connections every year, generally at the HFMA conference, and they become friends or really strong colleagues, So, and I think you wouldn't do that if you don't start building the skills pretty early on in terms of how to do networks and relationships outside of just your normal day-to-day organisation. So any opportunity to get involved in anything that's outside of the four walls that you're working in would be my probably first bit of advice.
What about you, Maddie?
Well, I think it's good advice that Amy's given there, and even within your organisation, there's opportunities to develop new skills and get involved with projects, because the finance profession are sort of uniquely placed, aren't we? That it's not all about the money, and it's not just about being an accountant and reporting. We've got broad project skills. We can apply strategy. We understand how to manage projects. We understand rate limiting steps, and so you can volunteer for things that are well outside of your comfort zone. And I think we saw a lot of that during COVID, didn't we? The finance teams sort of got much more involved in the rest of the hospital, and it was an opportunity to really try and do new things. So yeah, volunteering for stuff is I always encourage people to do that, and to step outside of their comfort zone and give it a go, really. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. You've talked about the support network being there, and I think that really does help if you want to step out of your comfort zone, knowing you've got lots of people there with you, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, also, I suppose crystal ball time really is things in NHS finance are always changing, aren't they? So, I mean, how do you think NHS finance is changing?
I mean, it's digital skills are inescapable now, aren't they? And I'm probably sometimes I think I'm a bit of a dinosaur when I'm writing reports, and not embracing um the all the skills that AI has to offer. But I did use Microsoft Copilot the other day to summarize something, and I thought I'm probably missing a trick here and need to be much more engaged with the new technology, and really think about how the team start to use that, and how we can move into much more added value business partnering, and automate a lot more. It sounds obvious, isn't it? And it's stuff that we talk about all the time, but we don't actually make much progress towards it sometimes, because we get stuck in a bit of a cycle of doing things a certain way. But it will radically change our profession going forward. And we need to think really carefully about how we train people in the future. I had a very traditional training scheme. I went and worked in every area of finance, from treasury, payroll, management accounting, and that's a good grounding for a future CFO, that you can see all the bits of the jigsaw and how they fit together. But increasingly, a lot of those underpinning functions will be more subject to digital, more automated. So as future finance leaders, it's sort of harder to see how tangibly it all fits together. So we will have to adapt to the way that we train people as well.
Yeah, completely agree. I think innovation, how we use AI, how we use the tools that we've already got, actually, that we're not using well at all, is something that we really need to focus on. I'm dead lucky with my team. I've got a few people that are hugely interested in this, so they submit innovations all of the time into One NHS Finance Innovation Network. They're really on it. I did say to them in the senior leadership team the other day that they need to keep dinosaurs like me up with them, because I need to be able to support them, basically, to spread this across the wider team. So lots more to do in that space. I think I've been to quite a lot of sessions that One NHS Finance and HFMA have done on how a finance team's going to move to become more digitalized, and what that will mean for finance team skills. And from my perspective, we're going to have to really think about how we are better at checking output than doing input, because actually AI is likely to do the input piece, and we're going to have to be really key in checking that output from there is really robust, and that it's reportable. And like you said, Maddie, I think for me it should add value to roles, because you'd start moving towards more time to do some of that business partnering, which I think we've said all the way through this podcast so far. That's what makes our roles the type of roles we want to get out of bed for every day. So for me, it feels exciting. but I am going to be relying on colleagues who are a lot better at this than me to help keep me up with the times, that's for sure.
Yeah. Again, it's about using that support of colleagues, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point you make there. So I think let's finish on that one, Amy. Kind of what excites you most about the future of NHS finance, I think.
Oh, what excites me the most? I have to think about that one.
I could ask you what worries you the most, but that might take a while.
Oh, I don't know what excites me most about the future. I think it's, for me, I still think it's a brilliant career. Despite the challenges, I think NHS finance, well, for me, it's been the best career I could have fallen into. So very lucky that I fell into it. I think it excites me that I'm excited by the work HFMA and One NHS Finance are doing at the moment, actually, to come together to make it clearer for teams around the choices that they have around development, opportunities such as that. I like the way we're trying to do some thinking in that space to help people in the development. But for me, I think more of the same, to be honest. I'm struggling with this one because yeah, I'm
You're already
struggling with it.
excited, aren't you, Amy?
I already think it's really good. And I think we continuously, year on year, we keep improving it, don't we? We keep improving the development offer. So from that point of view, it's really exciting. What I am excited about is that we get through this 3-year plan and we all have, if we achieve what we're expecting to achieve out of it, we'll all have balanced financial books, won't we? And hopefully at that stage, we'll have a lot of NHS organisations that are sustainable and will reduce, hopefully, the regulatory approach that we're seeing on organisations at the moment. So I'm excited for that.
And Maddie, you've seen it from both sides, haven't you, as well, with the ICB and the trust hat on, and kind of that must be really interesting trying to merge going forward what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the new ICBs get on with obviously half the infrastructure. Although they still seem to have reasonable sized teams, but it's definitely changing how it feels to be in a hospital because the regulatory piece has sort of shifted back to NHSE, and ICBs need to really get into that medium long term planning, outcome based commissioning now. So that will really change things. But I was going to go down a different segue in terms of what excites me about the future of the profession. And obviously, I've come into a new role, and one of the things I'm trying to do is strengthen the finance team. So we've had a few vacancies, but I've been really enthused and excited that we've had lots of really good quality applicants. And I think the future of the profession is strong because people still want to work in it. People still want to be NHS finance managers, and the diversity of applicants as well has changed hugely from when I started. It was really still quite male stale pale, and that's no disrespect to my colleagues when I started back in 1994. And we've just come a long way as a profession that, we have much more diverse finance directors and people coming through the ranks. And we need to make sure that we keep those rungs on the ladder to, to enable people to get into boards that, reflect our population much better. It's still a long way to go on that, but it is really changing. And I think HFMA and One NHS Finance do a lot of good work in that space. And I'm quite excited for that future, to see the next generation after me of CFOs and what we can do to help and support that.
Well, that's brilliant. That sounds like a really good point. That seems like a really good point, I think, to end our conversation for now. I could carry on talking for far too long, but we better stop at some point. But I think the main thing that really came through to me is that feeling of connection and support that working in NHS finance has given both of you throughout your career in many different roles. And also I think, Amy, when you talked about people sharing their innovations and sharing what they're doing well, and that it would be wrong of me not to plug the HFMA awards at that point, because they will be open as people are listening to this. So I think sharing what you're doing with others across the country is, one, really helpful for yourselves, in able to kind of articulate what you're doing, but for other people to hear it, it's just brilliant. So I would encourage people to do that as well. But for now, thank you both so much for joining me today. Thank you for those that are listening to us, and I hope you enjoy today's podcast as well as the series that's coming. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode on HFMA Talk. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed, we'd love for you to leave a 5-star rating on your favourite podcast platform. We'll see you in the next one.